we'll come to the 12 tribes of Ishmael. Many of us are familiar with the ancient story of Abraham and his desire to have a son. In the biblical account, Abraham first had a son with his handmaiden, Hagar. This firstborn son was named Ishmael. Abraham's second son, Isaac, was declared the son of promise. Welcome, dear friends, to another captivating journey through the pages of the Bible on our channel, Sacred Clues. Today, we delve into the intriguing narrative of Ishmael, the forgotten son of Abraham. This biblical tale is a tapestry of human struggles, divine promises, and the enduring grace of God. If you find inspiration in the timeless stories of faith, heritage, and redemption, you're in for a treat. Before we unravel the depths of Ishmael's story, make sure to subscribe to our channel Sacred Clues to stay connected with the profound wisdom and teachings of the Scriptures. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a compelling episode. Now, let's embark on this enlightening journey together. In Genesis 16:3, Sarah, who was still called Sarai, suggests to Abraham, who was still called Abram, to have a child with her Egyptian maidservant Hagar, whom she gives to him as a wife after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. This seems to be a common custom of the time, since Jacob's wives also resorted to it. The wife acted as a servant to her husband, but all children born from this union were considered hers, a possible early form of surrogacy. In antiquity, it was common for a barren woman to offer her husband a servant who would bear children in her stead. It was the wife, not the servant, who raised the children. While this solution may have seemed judicious to Abraham and Sarah, it created more problems than it solved. Hagar did indeed have a child with Abraham. When Hagar learned she was pregnant, she began to despise Sarah, and Sarah sought help from Abraham. Genesis 16:4-5 states that when Hagar saw she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Then Sarai said to Abram, "My wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace. And when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me." Abraham allowed Sarah to act as she wished. Sarah then mistreated Hagar, who fled from her. Sarah, being barren, had obtained a son from Hagar, and Ishmael was legally Sarah's child. However, this does not explain Sarah's treatment of Hagar. A few years later, God established a covenant with Abraham, requiring circumcision of all male members of his household. God commanded Abraham to circumcise his son Ishmael, as well as all other males in his household, including slaves born in his household and those acquired from foreigners. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and Ishmael was 13. The birth of Isaac, the legitimate son of Sarah and Abraham, exacerbated the already strained relational tensions between Sarah and Hagar. Indeed, these tensions had begun long before Ishmael's birth. As mentioned previously, it was in the desert that the angel of the Lord met Hagar and ordered her to return to Abraham. It was also there that the angel of the Lord told her the son she was carrying was to be named Ishmael. What does Ishmael mean? It means God has heard indeed. The Lord heard Hagar's distress. Genesis 16:11. However, the discord between Sarah and Hagar reached its peak at Isaac's weaning. Deeply upset, Sarah asked Abraham to send away Hagar and her son. Abraham considered Ishmael the son God had promised him. Indeed, Even when God revealed that Sarah would bear a son, Abraham questioned the need for this birth, since Ishmael could be his heir. In Genesis 17:18, Abraham says to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee." Even after Isaac's birth, Abraham continued to treat Ishmael kindly, saddened by Sarah's desire to disown him. Sarah, for her part, saw Ishmael as a threat to Isaac's place in the family and wanted to get rid of him. Genesis 21:34. This request to expel the maidservant and her son seemed to contravene all norms of ancient law. The children of maidservants could be demoted but not dismissed without valid cause. The fact that Abraham resisted such treatment, only acting on God's command, suggests the action undertaken was not in accordance with the standards of the time. One may wonder about Sarah's reaction. Was it because of an act committed by Ishmael that threatened Isaac, or was it simply his existence that posed a threat? Genesis 21:9 tells us that Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Does this mean Ishmael was mocking Isaac, or merely playing with him? Does the word mocking in this context mean mocking, deriding, or simply rejoicing in the situation? Sarah perceives Ishmael as a rival to Isaac, not because of any act he may have committed, but because of his very existence. The author of Genesis recounts the story of Ishmael mainly to establish a contrast between Isaac and Ishmael, not as individuals but as representations of God's work. The idea is that when God kept his promises to Abraham, he was not constrained by natural and ordinary laws. In other words, by the flesh. Although God's preference for Isaac as the son of the wife conforms to custom, the rejection of Hagar and Ishmael made the contrast more striking. Hagar was sent away with her son into the wilderness. Genesis 21:10-14. However, God still had plans for Ishmael. He assured Hagar that Ishmael, as Abraham's son, would become a great nation. Genesis 21:17-18. The fulfillment of this prophecy is reported in Genesis 25:12-18. Ishmael had 12 sons who became powerful leaders and eventually a nation. Hagar, who herself was of Egyptian origin, chose an Egyptian wife for her son, and Ishmael settled in the wilderness of Paran. Genesis 21:24. He had 12 sons and 1 daughter. The Bible lists Ishmael's sons in Genesis 25:13-16. Surprisingly, he is credited with 12 sons, just as Jacob had 12 sons. This compares to the 12 sons of Nahor and the 12 sons of Esau. Later, Ishmael's daughter married Esau, Isaac's son, as indicated in Genesis 28:9 and Genesis 36:3. The region of Havilah, where Ishmael's descendants lived, was in the north part of the Arabian Peninsula. Shur was a desert region between Beersheba, the Negev Desert, and Egypt. Isaiah 67 mentions the descendants of Nebaioth and Kedar as sheep breeders. Ishmael's descendants were called Arabs, which basically means nomads. From the beginning, Ishmael's descendants were a warring people, as they lived in hostility toward all their brothers. Thus was fulfilled God's prediction that Ishmael would be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Genesis 16:12. Later, other peoples settled in the Arabian Peninsula, including descendants of Abraham's sons by Keturah and some descendants of Esau, namely the Amalekites. Genesis 36:12. Even though Isaac alone remained Abraham's heir, Ishmael and Abraham's other sons by concubines were also blessed by him, as Genesis 25 indicates. This means that Hagar's sons, as well as Keturah's, received material goods from the patriarch once grown. The Bible reports no conflicts between Ishmael and Isaac. They are both described as burying Abraham at Mamre in Genesis 25:9. Most of these names are mentioned in other passages of the Bible as influential tribal families of that time. Ishmael's descendants, Abraham's son, are generally identified as Ishmaelites in the Bible. They were organized into 12 tribes, living in movable camps in the southern desert. Genesis 25. Ishmael died at the age of 137. Genesis 25:17. The Bible does not specify where he was buried, but Muslim tradition places his tomb at the Kaaba in Mecca, Descendants. In the New Testament, Ishmael is mentioned specifically by the Apostle Paul. The apostle used the figure of the slave woman's son in his allegory, contrasting the legalistic religious persecutors with those born according to the Spirit and enjoying freedom in Christ. Galatians 4:21-31. Ishmael became a relatively common name, so other characters are mentioned in the Bible as Ishmael. In conclusion of our analysis of Ishmael, Abraham's son, we can highlight several important points. Ishmael was not the son of God's promise to Abraham, but God still protected him. It was the Lord himself who chose the name Ishmael and destined him for greatness, even though he was outside the covenant. Ishmael was privileged to have numerous offspring comparable to Isaac's, and his lineage was structured into 12 tribal clans. God also characterized Ishmael, highlighting the nomadic lifestyle of his descendants and the resistance they would encounter from the children of the covenant. Over time, Ishmael's descendants associated with the Midianites, who were also descendants of Abraham through Keturah. This merging of intricately intertwined peoples in his stories led to an assimilation between Ishmaelites and Midianites in several biblical passages. Today, Arabs claim their genealogy from Abraham, mainly through Ishmael. A popular theory, widely spread among Muslims and some Christians, claims that Muslim Arabs are direct descendants of Ishmael. Indeed, Muhammad was one of the main proponents of this idea, declaring himself a descendant of Ishmael. According to the Quran, it is very likely that there is some truth to this theory. According to missionary and author Kenneth Fleming, what we know for certain seems to corroborate the hypothesis that the Ishmaelites constitute at least a significant part of the Arab genetic ancestry. Ancient texts clearly establish a link between the northern Arabs and the descendants of Ishmael. However, it is unlikely that all the inhabitants of Arabia are descendants of Ishmael, because Keturah's descendants and Esau's children also populated the Arabian Peninsula. While some modern Arabs may trace their origins to Ishmael, not all Arabs are descendants of Ishmael, contrary to Muslim claims. The Bible teaches us that God made Ishmael into a great nation. His descendants can share in Abraham's blessings by putting their faith in Jesus Christ for salvation. Ishmael's story, Abraham's son, transcends a simple individual biography. It reveals an important part of God's work and the unfolding of his grace in the history of salvation. Ishmael symbolizes natural birth, resulting from the fertile union between Abraham and Hagar, while Isaac represents supernatural birth where God manifested his great power by allowing a 90-year-old barren woman to conceive a child. The Apostle Paul uses the biblical story of Hagar and Sarah to illustrate a fundamental spiritual truth related to our salvation. In Galatians 4, Hagar symbolizes the Old Covenant rooted in human actions and the law. According to the Bible, Sarah embodies the New Covenant, which is based on divine grace through the redemptive work accomplished by God for humanity. In Paul's analogy, believers in Christ are like the child born of Sarah. We are free, born of the Spirit. Galatians 4:29-31. As we conclude this captivating exploration of Ishmael's story, we're reminded of the rich tapestry of human experience woven into the fabric of the Bible. Our channel, Sacred Clues, is dedicated to bringing these narratives to life, offering insights that resonate across time and cultures. If you've been moved or inspired by Ishmael's journey, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your brothers and family. By doing so, you contribute to our community's growth and help spread the wisdom encapsulated in these ancient tales. Thank you for being a part of Sacred Clues. Until next time, may the grace and wisdom of the Scriptures illuminate your path. Subscribe, share, and stay connected for more enriching stories from the pages of the Bible.